Lee.
Welcome back. You're in the War Room with your humble co-host, Roger Stone, joined by my colleague, Rob Dew. An extraordinarily excellent report by John Bowne regarding Sheila Jackson Lee. Just last week, Jackson Lee would tweet that Andrew McCabe, the deputy FBI director, who we know was involved in providing the funding for the so-called dirty dossier, the phony claim of sexual impropriety against candidate Donald Trump, allegedly in Moscow, which we have learned was a total and complete fabrication, but would later be used as a rationale for the wholesale illegal and unconstitutional surveillance of candidate Donald J. Trump, then President-elect Donald J. Trump and his campaign, and later his transition. But it was interesting that Jackson Lee defended McCabe, saying he had served his country with dignity and he was the subject of a presidential smear. In fact, Mr. McCabe has announced his intention to retire. The question one asks is, why is he being allowed to retire? Why is he not being prosecuted? Rob, if the president would follow our advice here at InfoWars, he would direct his attorney general, Jeff Sessions, to utilize his authority to appoint a special counsel in the matter of Uranium One, which would address the crimes of Mr. McCabe. And of course, because there is no special counsel law in place, that special counsel would be free to look into the dossier and its various iterations. The dossier, as we exclusively revealed here at InfoWars, was first utilized in the Republican primaries, paid for by the hedge fund manager, billionaire, and Marco Rubio supporter Paul Singer. And then, having failed to gain traction, was paid for yet again. The Fusion GPS people essentially double billing, in essence, by the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton, laundering those payments through a West Coast law firm. So,
and Roger,
Sheila
you made those points. So let me interject real quick. You made those points really succinctly in that C-SPAN interview that we just posted on InfoWars. Even though you did it 5 days ago, it's finally out on YouTube. And you really do lay out the case for keeping Mueller on to just kind of keep all the baby Democrats happy, appoint a special prosecutor that can look into Rosenstein, look into McCabe, look into Strzok, look into all these guys who are basically being political operatives, and really just turn the tables on this Russian collusion delusion. I thought you laid it out really well. And those interviewers were basically, it seemed like you wrote the questions, honestly, because every time they thought they were trying to get you with something, you came back right at them. And I think really just they were blown away at the arguments you were making, because you don't see those on mainstream TV. Those aren't talking points. That's something not in the playbook.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. Look, Tom Lobienko of the Associated Press and Michael Isikoff of Yahoo, formerly of Newsweek, and I believe NBC, are both very sharp reporters. I was disappointed to later see a tweet by Mr. Isikoff in which he said that Randy Credico, who had indeed served simply as a confirming source for me, confirming that, yes, Julian Assange, who he knew and who he interviewed 3 times for WBAI radio, 3 must-hear interviews, by the way, and they are archived, had given me the heads up about the contents of the emails regarding Hillary Clinton and heads up about the email of John Podesta. Neither one of those things are true. Mr. Credico, whose name I ultimately was required to give to the House Intelligence Committee, initially I was hesitant to give them Mr. Credico's name because I feared professional reprisal. And in fact, Mr. Credico, who I think is a true critic of the deep state, not a supporter of Donald Trump, a supporter of Jill Stein, not a man of the right, a man of the left, but a man of enormous integrity, someone who I've worked with closely for drug law reform and prison reform, was never privy to the content or the source of the information. He simply confirmed for me something Julian Assange had said on July 21st of last year. Ergo, he had the goods on Hillary, and he was going to publish them most likely in October. Credico confirmed that was true. Mr. Credico turned out to be accurate. The House Intelligence Committee, in an effort to conduct their witch hunt, sought to subpoena him, and he announced that he would plead the Fifth Amendment. But as far as that interview is concerned, and I think this is important, Mr. Isikoff stands corrected. I never received any information regarding the content or source, simply that Assange, who I consider to be a journalist, had the goods.
But they had already decided that Credico was your ultimate source, and they were just going to run with that narrative. And they just, I think, wanted you to admit Randy Credico's name so they could say, oh, he admitted it. He admitted it. We got him. It was just one of these, and it wasn't even a gotcha moment, but they tried to turn it into a gotcha moment.
Yeah, and look, I don't even deny that I was reluctant to turn over his name for two reasons. Right. One, I consider this a privileged conversation between journalists. I report for InfoWars. He reported for BAI. He was merely a confirming source. And secondly, I feared that progressives would have reprisals against him. Indeed, Mr. Credico was terminated at WBAI, a great tragedy because I think that his was a freewheeling and independent and most entertaining radio show. Progressive listeners in New York are the lesser for his absence, but that is the vindictiveness of the progressive left. I also am one of those who does not believe that Twitter accidentally, temporarily took down the feed of Julian Assange. Rob, can you say dry run?
Yeah, that's what happened with the president. Exactly what happened with the president. They were just seeing if they could do it, and then they come up with this cockamamie story of a contractor from a different country who did it on his way out the door just to see if it would happen, and total BS. This was something they were planning to see if they can do it, because when the purge happens, all voices of dissent will go silent, and that's when the roundups will begin.
I mean, total agreement. You'll recall in the case of the president, they took his Twitter feed down for 11 minutes, blaming some disgruntled employee who did it on his way out the door.
Right.
Nonsense. Nonsense.
Yeah, total BS. Now, Roger, I would like to get into, we got into your interview. We just had some breaking news come out. Romanian hackers took over D.C. surveillance cameras just before presidential inauguration, federal prosecutors say. And then this from the New York Times, Trump the insurgent breaks with 70 years of American foreign policy. So this has to have the globalists shaking in their boots. I've also got CNBC director accused of spying on teen with hidden bathroom camera. And universities face the Me Too movement over sexual harassment. So the Me Too movement is now moving into other areas. And now I think some of these cases are getting a little ridiculous. This one lady that took her 10 years to talk about a professor who made comments about her weight and talking about sex. But it took her 10 years to come out with that. At some point, we have to have a timeout for some of these people and just say, really? Really? Is this what we're going to spend our time and money on? But we also spend our time and millions of dollars on the Russian collusion delusion. So I'm not surprised that we are spending our time and money talking about this. We're back in less than 4 minutes. Hold on, Roger. We're going to break. 20 seconds left. Don't forget, you can watch us on the free stream, Infowars.com/show. You're watching The War Room. I'm Rob Dew. We got Roger Stone. Stay tuned. We got a whole hour coming up.
Welcome back to The War Room with your co-hosts, Roger Stone and Rob Dew. Rob, I want to go back to one of the news items you raised today, and that regards the Romanians hacking into the system to control the security cameras during the presidential inauguration. I visited Romania, as you know, several months ago to meet with opponents of the deep state there. It's important to note that the intelligence services in Romania, which they refer to locally as the secret services, and their broad anti-corruption apparatus is largely and heavily controlled by George Soros and his allies. The United States Embassy in Bucharest is controlled by George Soros. I have seen with my own eyes that they have refused to put up the official portrait of the President of the United States in the U.S. Embassy in Bucharest. The Romanian secret services are analogous to our own deep state, and they were heavily invested in the election of Hillary Clinton. Now, here's the newsworthy part. FBI Director James Comey made several mysterious trips to Romania prior to this hacking. What those trips were about, we don't exactly know, but I am researching this aggressively for InfoWars, and we will have a special report on it shortly.
Well, that's very interesting. Right now, it lists the names of two of the people who were arrested in Romania. Mihai Izvanka and Evelyn Kismaru were arrested in Romania earlier this month, along with 3 other Romanian hackers who will face prosecution in Europe. The U.S. charges filed under a seal of December 11th were first reported by CNN. So they face up to 20 years in prison if convicted. And essentially, they took over 123 of the department's 187 outdoor surveillance cameras, leaving them unable to record for several days, which, if somebody was planning something like planning a bomb or anything like that, any type of malfeasance during the lead up to the inauguration, they would not have been able to utilize those surveillance cameras during that time period. So it'll be interesting to see who they were in contact with, if anyone, from the United States. Like you mentioned, it seems like James Comey made a trip there right before this happened. That is very interesting. Very interesting to a man who runs around quoting Bible verses on Twitter now.
I would suggest to you that the people arrested are patsies, that they are people being utilized by the secret services there, and we need to dig into what Mr. Comey was doing in Romania. I believe that he makes more than one trip during the Obama presidency, but the purposes of those trips are undisclosed. Rob, this just in from The Hill. A tweet by Hillary Clinton says that it's crazy to believe that the FBI is out to get Donald Trump. Now, this comes from a woman who writes in her book, What Happened, that Roger Stone is a bizarre character. I'm bizarre? This is a woman who mothers a daughter with Webster Hubble and claims that it's Bill's daughter. This is a woman who banishes Bill's legitimate, natural-born son, Danny Williams. This is a woman who lies repeatedly about her email. This is a woman whose crimes are exposed days before the election in a score of hundreds of thousands of emails in the possession of Huma Abedin. Who's crazy Hillary? You're crazy Hillary. And when it comes to her shrewd powers of observation, I put her up there with Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder. You would have to be an imbecile not to see the rank partisanship of the FBI, the activities of Peter Strzok, and the naked partisanship of the Get Trump squad as organized under Mr. Mueller and as conducted by Mr. Comey and Mr. McCabe.
That is exactly true. And if you look at her book, that's all she does is blame the FBI. So the FBI was totally against her, even though we have texts from Peter Strzok talking about insurance policies that they have to have in case Trump gets in. You know, like if you die before you're 40, I believe, as the text read, as he was texting his lover. So that is very, very interesting that now Hillary Clinton is back from out of the woods. I guess she's done hiking, and now she's talking. There it is. Wall Street Journal, Russian investigation was insurance policy mentioned in Strzok texts. There it is right there. You can read the whole article on Infowars.com.
And from the Wall Street Journal, not from an alt-right publication, but from a bona fide mainstream media outlet. Look, Hillary Clinton's notion that the FBI was against her is hard to square with the fact that it was Peter Strzok who changed the language in their final report regarding her illegal email server so that she could evade prosecution, changing it from to carelessness from criminal negligence, in essence. So, yes, there was an FBI bias. Hillary's right about that. That bias was for Hillary Clinton and against Donald Trump. And the overwhelming evidence demonstrates that that is the case.
Speaking of evidence, I have the lawsuit that Roy Moore filed, which it seems like the judge has thrown it out, and they are going to just anoint Doug Jones as the senator. But going through this, he definitely has a case. He's got signed affidavits in here from computer experts who looked over the anomalies. They list the anomalies. I'm going to go all over them in the next hour, where you can just see that 13,000 votes were given to Doug Jones, taken from Roy Moore, a 26,000 vote swing, which would have put Moore in the victor's chair. And I want to go to this article, Roger. This is also on the Drudge Report right now. Trump the Insurgent breaks with 70 years of American foreign policy. It first starts talking about how he walked through NATO headquarters and was bitching that it was all glass and that it must have cost a fortune to build. That is basically what NATO has done. All right, NATO is this group, and that's not if you talk about the bombings that they did back in the 70s and 80s to kind of foment fake terrorism in Italy and other places. But he talks about that and how he was mad about that, and that steamed him. Also, he has broken with decades of American policy in the Middle East by recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Now, Trump tweeted out video of all the presidents in the last 25 years saying, hey, I think I'm going to make Jerusalem the capital of Israel. We're going to do that. We're going to make that change. Yet they never did it. And then Trump said it, and then he did it. And the New York Times is obviously pissed about that.
It's extraordinary because it shows the difference between Donald Trump and these other career politicians. Mm-hmm. It has always been in the Republican platforms. It was pledged by Republican president after Republican president. But Donald Trump is a man who does what he says and says what he will do. He pulls no punches. This was a courageous act. And it appears that all
right, we're going to break. Roger, I'll let you finish up on the...
Welcome back to the War Room. I'm your host, Roger Stone, with my colleague, Rob Dew. Rob, a stunning new development. As you know, the Project for Democracy, a Barack Obama-blessed group, is suing Donald Trump and I in the federal courts in the District of Columbia in essentially what is a harassment lawsuit, an entirely bogus suit, which claims that Trump and I worked together with the Russians to hack the Democratic National Committee and deliver their email to WikiLeaks. They, of course, offer no evidence or proof whatsoever. How could they? None of this ever really happened. But now, joining as a new lead counsel in the case is a woman named Anne Hardin Tyndall. Now, Ms. Tyndall's joining the case is interesting from a number of points of view. First of all, she comes from the Consumer Finance Board headed by Richard Cordray that was created under the Dodd-Frank legislation. This is, of course, the runaway federal agency that was being used essentially to harass businesses that had no congressional or executive oversight. The president, when Mr. Cordray resigned, appointed his OMB director, the Michael Mulvaney, while those who worked at the CFPB insisted that the authority flowed not from the president to appoint a new director, but to Mr. Cordray's deputy. This is a fight we have covered here at InfoWars. But here's what's interesting about Anne Hardin Tyndall. She comes from the law firm of Wilmer Hale. Wilmer Hale is the law firm of Robert Mueller. It is Wilmer Hale who enters into an agreement with the Justice Department waiving any conflicts in the Russian collusion investigation. This is a waiver that the Justice Department refuses to make public. So to sum this up, Rob, a hit woman from Mr. Mueller's law firm has now joined the plaintiff's table in the bogus lawsuit against Roger Stone and Donald Trump. Just the motion to dismiss this bogus law firm cost me personally $150,000 in legal fees. And now, as you know, the entire top line of the Obama NSA, Mr. Clapper, Mr. Brennan, and others in the shaved head brigade have weighed in with an amicus brief reiterating their garbage about the Russians hacking the American electoral system, but once again providing no evidence or proof beyond their bogus, repetitious claim.
And no one's investigated the stinking server. I mean, can we just get an investigation of the stinking server that supposedly was hacked by the Russians? Oh, no, we can't get that. That would make sense because that would put all this to rest, and we can't have that. We have to have this thing drawn out and go after our political enemies because we really don't have a leg to stand on. That's what the Democrats are saying to themselves.
Let's go through that piece by piece if we can, Rob.
Sure.
There's a terrific new report by this researcher, Stephen McIntyre, who's been covering the DNC hack for months. And here's what we learned. In late April 2016, the DNC contracted the cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike in response to a suspected breach of their internet servers. During an on-site audit in early May of 2016, CrowdStrike suddenly discovers malware, they say, on the DNC network, and to mitigate it, they installed their own flagship product called Falcon to monitor the network for malware and to prevent other hackers. In May of 2016, after Falcon has been installed on the DNC network, WikiLeaks receives mail from the DNC with dates as late as the 25th of May, detailing the alleged breach and the response from CrowdStrike. On June 12, 2016, during an interview with ITV's Peston on Sunday, Julian Assange of WikiLeaks states that WikiLeaks is in possession of the leaked emails relating to Hillary Clinton. On June 14th of 2016, less than 48 hours after Assange's announcement, the Washington Post prints an article covering a story from CrowdStrike executives Sean Henry and Dmitry Alperovich, claiming that they have worked on eliminating the last of the hackers from the DNC's network during the previous weekend. This becomes an indirect admission that their Falcon software has failed. Then on June 15th, CrowdStrike publicizes a report in which they share their evidence of the breach and the samples of the malware code they claimed that they found. It's important to note that the malware has nothing to do with email or their email servers, and to date, CrowdStrike has not demonstrated how such malware relayed, forwarded, or accessed the DNC email. The whole Russians did it narrative was started by CrowdStrike when they reported supposedly that Russian malware known as Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear were examples put forward, supposedly malware which had invaded the DNC system. Here's their big mistake as discovered by Mr. McIntyre. Their malware programs were compiled after CrowdStrike installed their software on the DNC servers. To remind you, the act of compiling a program is the process where the programming code typed in by the developers converted into an executable software package that can be run on a computer. It's a conscious act by the developer which requires precise actions to complete. By releasing samples of the viruses with the compiling dates, we can be certain that there were no malware by the Russians in the DNC network. And this, Rob, is why the Democratic National Committee would never allow the FBI to examine their servers. It is most likely that their servers were never hacked.
And people like Adam Schiff know this is the case because during your testimony, they admitted that some of these people had seen the servers. They had seen reports of them, but people like Trey Gowdy had not, and he stormed out of your testimony fuming.
Well, in fact, Mr. Comey and the Homeland Security Secretary, Jed Johnson, both sat in the exact same chair in which I sat and gave testimony and claimed that the FBI had never been allowed to examine the servers. Yet Adam Schiff and Congresswoman Jackie Speier, that rhymes with liar, claimed alternatively that that was not the case. We still don't know the truth of this, but I am one who believes with William Binney, with Ray McGovern and others, that it is likely that the DNC was never hacked at all. It is likely that the purloined material was downloaded to a zip drive or a thumb drive or some other portable device and taken out the back door, most likely, unfortunately for him, by Seth Rich. May he rest in peace.
And we had a caller yesterday who was claiming, he didn't offer any proof, but he was claiming that Seth Rich brought this information to Donna Brazile about what the DNC was doing, trying to subvert Bernie in favor of Hillary and anoint Hillary. And she may have been the one that gave him the okay to do what he did. But by doing that, she inadvertently got him killed, which is why she's running around saying, oh, he felt like he was my baby. I had to bury my baby. So there it is. Donna Brazile said she feared for her life after Seth Rich was killed. Maybe she thought they were going to come after her next. We'll be right back. Final segment with Roger Stone just around the corner. Thank you for watching us here at the War Room. I'm Rob Dew. That's Roger Stone. Infowars.com/show is the free stream to send to everybody you know.
Welcome back to the War Room. I'm your co-host, Roger Stone. Speaking of Stevie Wonder, that's the man himself. Rob, there's an extraordinary controversy going on in which Joy Villa, the singer, who made waves by appearing at the Grammys wearing a Make America Great dress, has claimed that Corey Lewandowski, who was discharged as Donald Trump's campaign manager, came up to her at a private party at the Trump Hotel in D.C. and slapped her on the rump. When she asked him to stop, he evidently, according to her, slapped her again and said, I think she said, stop that or I'll file a sexual harassment complaint, to which he responded, go ahead, I'm in the private sector, whereupon, according to Villa, he smacked her again. Now, I'm a believer in due process, and Ms. Villa has said to the media that she has two witnesses, and there is security camera video. Now, let me be very clear. Joy Villa is a friend of mine. She's someone I like. Some have criticized her because she supported Bernie Sanders early in the campaign, coming later to Donald Trump. Let me point out that 3 out of 10 Sanders supporters supported Donald Trump. Without them, his victory would be impossible. Now, Joe Biggs, formerly of InfoWars, also a friend of mine, comes forward to defend Lewandowski. Now, let's let the process take its course. I believe in due process. The D.C. Metropolitan Police are conducting their investigation into Miss Villa's formal complaint. A video has now surfaced on the internet of Miss Villa at a private party among conservatives, where she is horsing around with a group of friends and someone smacks her on the bottom. I see a distinct difference between consensual horseplay among friends, who are, in this case, you can see in the video, goofing around, and what would be, under the laws of the District of Columbia, sexual assault from a stranger. Let's let the process take its course. but it would be my preference to see how the matter plays out before jumping to any conclusion. I myself would point out that Mr. Lewandowski was previously accused of manhandling a woman, an incident that I write in my book, The Making of the President 2016, almost derailed the Trump campaign because the presidential candidate got off of the large themes of job creation and corruption and making America great again, and had to defend the actions of Mr. Lewandowski. It is also, in all fairness, key to note that no charges were pursued in that particular matter in which Mr. Lewandowski was accused of grabbing and manhandling a woman reporter, Michelle Fields, during a scrum. So that is the latest. This is a story we will be following. A note of full disclosure, to be absolutely clear. There are media reports that I am a paid consultant or an advisor to a congressional campaign by Miss Villa. That is not the case. She is a friend. Any advice I have given her has been completely voluntary, but I have no formal or paid role in her campaign, and she is not today an announced candidate for Congress.
So, Roger, I was sent this video last night, and I could have put it out on Twitter. Personally, this is turning into a, what do we call it? Where, not conspiracy, but it's a, I'll think of the name in a second. But this is not something we usually do on InfoWars, is get into people's personal battles, although it has become a news story. But this video shows her, slapping a guy on the butt. Apparently, somebody told me, and I don't know if this is true or not, that this was the night of that party that this happened. I don't know if that's true. I didn't put it out because I don't want to get into the controversy. I don't really care. I will say this, though. I did find, I think we have a video montage of butt slapping, which I guess should be played at some point while we're talking about this. Maybe you guys can bring it up and play it. But here's an article, teen facing felony rap for butt slap. A 14-year-old boy slapped a girl's buttocks at their high school, and now he's looking at getting a crime or being charged with battery. They're not calling it a sexual crime, but they're saying it's more of a case of battery. But here's a good set. Here we go. We're getting some, look at that. We got the coaches slapping their players on the butts. This looks like a Dallas Cowboys tribute of butt slapping going on. So butt slapping happens all over. And I'm not saying that Lewandowski was right if he did indeed do this. I'm saying there's bigger fish to fry than butt slapping. And that's where I kind of want to leave it. But like the CNBC director spying on his teen au pair using a bathroom camera, that's what he's been accused of at this point, saying he intentionally installed a video recording device in a tissue box located in his family bathroom. That's 44-year-old Dan Switzen, director of the Susie Orman Show, is being accused of doing that to record his 18-year-old live-in nanny at their residence. So
just one clarifying point. The video that you showed very briefly on your cell phone was taken in Las Vegas well over 6 weeks ago, whereas the incident at the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C. was allegedly 2 weeks ago. Again, I draw a distinction between consensual activity among friends, in essence horseplay, and something that is codified. But again, let's not rush to judgment. Let's let due process take its course and see exactly who is in the wrong here. I do think that Ms. Villa would be a strong candidate for Congress. And unlike some, the fact that she came over to Trump from Sanders does not give me pause. If nobody had come over from Sanders to Trump, pardon me, then we would not have a President Trump today. We would not have a record stock market. We would not have unemployment at historic lows, the housing boom, a conservative on the Supreme Court, and so on.
And would we have a Joy Villa butt slapping scandal that we currently have?
We probably would not, indeed.
All right. We got about 2 minutes, 45 seconds left. It looks like the Me Too, since we're on this sexual harassment, and where I think it's starting to go a little too far. Universities face Me Too movement over sexual harassment. They talk about Celeste Kidd was a graduate student. Her supervising professor was making her life unbearable, stalking her. Maybe that's pretty bad. And making demeaning comments about her weight and talking about sex. 10 years later, she's now taking legal action. Now, this is obviously isn't the case with Joy Villiers. She's doing it within a couple weeks after. But here, 10 years, is there a statute of limitations on making comments about somebody's weight? I mean, where do we draw the line in this, Roger?
Yeah, no, look, I agree with you. We are reaching relatively absurd proportions.
Peak Me Too, I think is what we could call it. Peak Me Too.
Well, look, I have my best and worst dressed list coming up very shortly. And yes, I had written some things regarding the garb and overall personal presentation of Ana Navarro. And I decided to delete those because fat shaming is unacceptable on the internet these days. While we've only got about a minute and a half left to go here, Rob, I do want to say that if you like what we're doing here at the War Room, if you like our expanded program and the almost 10 hours a day now, starting with the real news in the morning all the way to the War Room in the late afternoon, please go to the InfoWars store and take advantage of some of these extraordinary end-of-the-year sales that Alex Jones has extended to New Year's Day. You will find some of our most incredible products at deep, deep discounts. A couple of my all-time favorites, the new formula Alpha Power, which is a vitality formula developed to boost your personal performance and your energy levels. This has got an incredibly powerful set of ingredients, I think, fusing the ancient Chinese herbs such as epimedium, Tribulus terraris, and others with modern cutting-edge, all-natural ingredients like niacin, zinc, the Eurycomia longiflorea root extract, and other proven boosters of vitality. And right now, this incredibly powerful and energizing product can be found on the internet at the InfoWars store at an extraordinary 50% off.
50%
Help
off,
us
that's right.
finance the revolution. God bless you.
So joining us now is Roger Stone. Thank you for joining us, Roger.
David, I'm delighted to be with you. I went out and put on a beautiful double-breasted English tailored suit this morning only to learn that our camera is down. So I join you via audio today.
Well, thank you for joining us.
What a shame.
We're always happy to have you on anyway.
Yeah, the Nation article is really extraordinary. Even those on the left are beginning to realize that what we have here is hysterical red baiting.
Yes.
Fear-mongering, Russophobia. It's interesting the way our politics have reversed themselves in the 50s and before that in the 30s. It was those on the right who were accused of being too sensitive to and too anti-communist. Now, that seems to be transferred to the left. This lawsuit, which the article is specifically about, in which I am being sued along with President Trump by the Project for Democracy, which is a Barack Obama-blessed front group, recently brought in an amicus brief signed by the whole front line of the Obama NSA, John Brennan, James Clapper, and the rest of the shaved head crowd. Has nothing to do with me. They just repeat their same bogus claim that the Russians are under every rock, behind every tree. Oh, they've interfered with the election. They offer no proof. And they offer nothing that ties me to any of this, if it even really happened. So now it's extraordinary. Even publications like The Nation are catching on to the fact that this is an attempt to stigmatize all dissent.
And in this article, Roger, what they point out is that in this brief that's there, they say the complaint that was filed says that it does not contain any hard evidence that the campaign did anything. So the nation is pointing this out. I mean, certainly they don't agree with us on the policies. They don't agree with Trump, but they don't want to see political dissent and opinion criminalized like this. And they're very concerned, as you point out, the front line of the National Intelligence Services, Brennan, Clapper, and others, being politicized like this. This concerns the nation, and they should be concerned. I've been saying that people on the left and the right, regardless of what you think about this, the thing that you should fear is this politicization of the intelligence services. You know, when Megyn Kelly was here, she said, oh, did you see my interview with Putin? I said, I'm not worried about Putin. I'm worried about the CIA and the NSA being politicized in this country. I see that as the greatest danger. And now the nation is saying the same thing as well.
And they're responsible, David, for the erosion of our civil liberties. I mean, we know from the FISA court disclosures in November that the Barack Obama NSA was surveilling as many as 30,000 Americans, overwhelmingly Republicans, for what was clearly just an act of political espionage, using the state spying apparatus financed by the taxpayers to spy on the Republican presidential candidate and his campaign. 10 times worse than anything Richard Nixon was ever accused of in Watergate.
Well, you know, it was Michael Hayden who bragged to students at Washington and Lee, and I bring this up frequently. He said to them, he said, we don't look at bad people. We're interested in interesting people. And this is exactly what we have seen. They're interested in people like President Trump. They're going to be the first line of what William Binney said when I interviewed him. He said, they have become the Praetorian Guard. They're going to pick who the leaders of this country are because they're the real leaders eventually. The people who are set up to protect the emperor then start picking the emperor.
No, it is a out of control rogue elite that are seeking to subvert our democracy. And it's funny, the left went so crazy about Watergate. No person is above the law, they told us. Yet it appears to me like Obama and his NSA have violated the law, have violated my civil liberties, the civil liberties of Donald Trump and his family and his associates. And at this point, it appears they will pay no penalty for it whatsoever.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the other thing that the nation pointed out in this, they said, you know, this lawsuit, this amicus brief that was filed there, says that Russia deploys, quote, active measures that seek to undermine confidence in democratic leaders and institutions to sow discord within the United States. What is it that the Russiagate investigation done by these same people is doing? It's doing all of that. It's active measures. It undermines our democratic leaders, our institutions, and it's sowing discord. That's precisely what they are doing.
Notice in the same article, it cites the amicus brief as saying that the Russians work through political operatives, and it goes on to say academics and so on. That's an implication. It's a bogus implication. There is no evidence whatsoever, nor did I ever have any contact with any Russians or individuals working on behalf of Russia during or before the presidential campaign. The entire Russian collusion is a delusion, yet Congressman Adam Schiff and Congressman Nancy Pelosi, who have already spent millions and come up empty-handed, want to continue the probe and spend millions of more of the taxpayers' money in what is clearly just a naked partisan attempt to smear the president.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. Now, the question is, you said they may not pay any penalty for this, but I think there may be a question as to whether or not there is a counter coup that is beginning now. We had a week ago, I was just talking to Dr. Jerome Corsi about what had happened a week ago. We had Attorney General Jeff Sessions say, hey, we're going to start interviewing people from the FBI about the Uranium One deal. On the same day, we had an executive order quietly signed by President Trump, not much attention, but what it looks like is a RICO type of statute to come after the assets of anybody who is involved in corruption. And of course, when we're looking at corruption, we're talking about Uranium One. And specifically listed, Roger, 13 individuals, 6 of whom have very close ties, as I talked about yesterday, to the Clintons. Is this a move, you think, like we've had former prosecutors invoke the RICO statute against organized crime families? Is this a move to invoke something like that against the organized crime family of the Clintons?
Well, David, from your mouth to God's ear, this certainly does seem to be tailored specifically for the Uranium One scandal, where we know that Mr. Mueller, Mr. Comey, both as FBI directors, Mr. McCabe as the assistant director of the FBI, and U.S. Attorney then Rod Rosenstein were up to their hips and had full knowledge of both bribery and other improper and illegal activities surrounding the sale of 20% of Americans' enriched uranium supply to a company controlled by the Kremlin. I think Alex Jones has hit this better than anybody I know. Think of the chutzpah involved. They're accusing Donald Trump of being in bed with the Russians when we now learn it was the front line of the Clinton and the Obama administration who were in fact in bed with the Russians. They're the ones who were colluding with the Russians against America's interests. So
typical liberal projection, isn't it?
Yeah,
projecting their crimes onto other people, hoping that they can hang other people for what they have done. And of course, as we pointed out before, the same central characters involved in that Uranium One are leading this investigation. Can you stay with us one more segment, Roger?
Yes, absolutely. I want to do.
All right, we'll be right back with Roger Stone. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Roger Stone. In the last segment, we're talking about the Russian gate insanity devolving into the kind of witch hunt that is looking. The Senate Intelligence Committee is actually asking anybody, have you ever talked to any Russian citizens or even people of Russian descent? And many people on the left are saying, are you serious? Are you serious? You're talking about 1% of the population has Russian descent. My wife has, she's half Italian, and on the other side, it's Polish and Prussian. She says, is that going to get me in here in the Russian investigation? I mean, this is the desperation and the insanity of people. But we were just pointing out, Roger, that this may be turning now at this point as Jeff Sessions awakes, or maybe this was something that they've been laying out for quite some time. What do you think is going to happen next?
Well, David, I myself have just received a letter from the Senate Judiciary Committee asking me to answer a number of questions. And the incredible thing is that if anyone on the Senate Judiciary Committee staff or any member of the Senate who's on the committee had read my under oath statement before the House Intelligence Committee, I've already answered every single one of their questions in detail. So they're falling over themselves here in an effort to prop up what is clearly a flagging investigation. But I have come to the conclusion, David, that the executive order that you just cited may be the precursor to a move that we at InfoWars have been advocating now for several weeks, and that is that the President of the United States, completely within his authority, order Jeff Sessions to appoint a special prosecutor, a special counsel, in the matter of Uranium One. That would put Mr. Mueller, Mr. Comey, Mr. McCabe, and Mr. Rosenstein under immediate federal investigation. I'm going to amend that view now. I've thought about it after I did an interview with C-SPAN, which I taped last Friday and which aired this past Sunday. I think the president should fire Rod Rosenstein right now. And the reason for that firing is he has violated the ethical rules of the Justice Department because he appointed a special prosecutor, in this case, Mr. Mueller, with whom he has a close personal relationship. Yes. The rules say that even the appearance of a conflict is grounds for dismissal. That way, if the president appoints, orders Sessions to appoint a special prosecutor, and Sessions demurs, which seems to be possible, the decision would then not be bucked to Rosenstein, but would go on instead to the Solicitor General, who I believe would carry out the president's orders. Rosenstein is a menace. Rosenstein is an asp in the bosom. It's time for President Trump to give this guy his walking papers.
Yeah, he was involved with Comey for a long time, and with Mueller going back as part of this uranium stuff, Uranium One stuff. These guys have all been working together for quite some time, and it was just this last week that Alan Dershowitz said the same thing you just said, Roger, about even the appearance of a conflict of interest when he was talking about Andrew McCabe and saying he should never have been involved in investigating Hillary Clinton because of his deep ties and his wife's ties to McAuliffe, to the DNC and so forth as she was running for office. He should have never let himself get in that position. But of course, these guys like McCabe, like Rosenstein, they don't play by the same rules that Jeff Sessions does. He was overly cautious, many people believe, because all he had done as a senator was to talk to a Russian ambassador, which senators do all the time. But because that could be construed by some people as a conflict of interest, he removed himself out. And yet these people like Rod Rosenstein, as you just pointed out, and Andrew McCabe, who have, I would say, not just the appearance of a conflict of interest, but real, serious conflict of interest, have continued to keep themselves at the center of these investigations. Stay with us. We got one more segment with Roger Stone. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Roger Stone at the top of the hour. Many of you have a news break at the top of the hour, radio stations. We had a bit of new news from Roger Stone saying that he has now gotten another letter from the Senate Judiciary Committee to respond to them and asking the same types of questions that had been asked of him in a closed session. Roger, is this something that they want a written response to, or do they want you to come talk to them? Is it going to be a public questioning that is coming up with the Senate Judiciary Committee?
Well, they have given me a deadline to respond to their questions in writing, which we are working with my lawyers to do. It's not very difficult because I've answered all these questions previously. It's very clear to me that between the House and the Senate, the left hand does not know what the far left hand is doing. And there's enormous duplication here, but I'm going to respond forthrightly and completely to all their questions yet again, because I frankly like to clear the air on this whole Russian matter. Going back to our previous conversation, it is absolutely clear to me that the president should terminate Rosenstein immediately, and then order Sessions to appoint a special prosecutor. Now, the president has said a number of things in tweets and in interviews which lead me to believe that his lawyers have told him that it is somehow improper for him to issue orders to the Justice Department. David, that's not true. The Justice Department is an expansion of the executive branch, and the president has full authority to call Jeff Sessions and give him a direct order. The left has been so much more effective at weaponizing the judiciary against conservatives. Republicans, I think, respect the Constitution and they respect the division of powers. And we have not used our justice departments during Republican presidencies as a vendetta vehicle, as a political vanguard. Perhaps it's time for us to finally do so.
Well, as you pointed out, the Justice Department is under the executive branch and the FBI is under the Justice Department. That's why President Trump could fire Comey. And that's why people like Alan Dershowitz have said there is nothing improper about him doing that. That's not a criminal act that the left is up in arms so much about. So, yes, he could get rid of Rod Rosenstein as well. How do you see this? Of course, you have the interview that was on C-SPAN, and we have that on Infowars.com. Excellent interview. Great job that you did there on that broadcast, Roger. And if people want to see that, they can see that at Infowars.com. But as we move forward with this, and as we see the many things that are coming up, as you pointed out, I think even certainly, yes, Rosenstein should be removed. But I think that Jeff Sessions truly has awakened. Because not only did we get the announcement that they're going to be investigating deposing FBI agents about Uranium One, we had the executive order that would basically give RICO power to them to take away the assets of people who were involved in corruption. But then we also see that, and this is kind of an interesting development that I just noticed today, Roger, and that is the Awans, Imran Awan and others. It appears that maybe something is brewing with the Justice Department because they had a January the 8th court date. Luke Rosiak, who's been broke all these stories about about Imran Awan and the family and their relationship with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. He points out, hey, they had a January 8th court date. That has disappeared, and I can't find it anywhere. And the wife who had escaped from the country has now agreed to return and to testify. Are they turning these people, you think?
Well, we now know extraordinarily, David, that House Speaker Paul Ryan knew as early as September of 2016 what the Awans were up to and what they had done. Mm-hmm. He knew that they, at that point, had stolen as much as $16 million in cash through bogus online financial transactions regarding the House computer system. Yet he did not go public or allow the House to go public with that information until after the election. I'm really scratching my head about that. Luke Rosiak has done extraordinarily effective reporting on this entire issue. And it appears to me that the Awan brothers penetrating the House computer system really is an act of a breach of national security, I guess is the best way to put it. This may be a much, much bigger scandal than the mainstream media has acknowledged. Here,
they're corrupt in so many different ways. They're paid extraordinarily high salaries by Debbie Wasserman Schultz, even though they had no IT credentials. So there obviously is something going on, just besides the fact that they are petty criminals. There was something going on with Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Well, more troubling is the fact that after Wasserman Schultz was formally informed by the Capitol Hill Police that the Awan brothers were under investigation, she changed their status in the House computer system from consultant to staffer to allow their uninterrupted access to the House computer system. Yeah. That means that, in my view, she becomes an accessory in their crimes, an accessory in their theft of both data and money. Yet here in Fort Lauderdale, this story has yet to appear on page 1 of the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel, the dominant newspaper in Deborah Wasserman Schultz's district.
Wow. And of course, we have seen the clips where she was threatening the Capitol Hill Police, saying, get me back my laptop, because they had confiscated some stolen disk drives and other things from the Awan brothers. And she was very concerned about what was on there and threatening the Capitol Hill Police chief with consequence. There will be consequences for you. They got that on tape. I mean, she is very worried about what they're going to find out there. But we may have not only the disk drives singing, but we may have the Awan family singing some stories about Debbie Wasserman Schultz, whether it's picked up in her local district's newspaper or not.
She reminds me of every man's first wife. I mean, in all honesty, I don't know how you could wait.
Not my first wife. I don't know.
But
my first wife's great.
I was joking, of course. But,
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
This woman is a terror. She is arrogant. She's entitled. She has kind of the same attitude as Sheila Jackson, the congresswoman we talked about night on the War Room, who pitched a fit on an airline because she feels entitled to be treated differently than the rest of the American citizens. No, I think there are serious crimes here. Again, though, why Jeff Sessions' Justice Department has not opened an investigation into Wasserman Schultz, why she hasn't been charged as an accessory in the crimes of the Awan brothers, when she very clearly continued their access to the House computer system after she knew they were under investigation. I think that makes her a conspirator.
Yes, and again, as you pointed out with the parallels to the Queen of Sheila Jackson Lee, telling everybody, I am a queen, from the very beginning of this. I mean, the arrogance of these people is exceeded only by their corruption, isn't it, Roger? It's just absolutely amazing what we're seeing from these people in power for a very long time.
No, we see John Conyers leaving the House, and then he hands the seat over to his son, so that the pattern of corruption and arrogance can continue. David, it's an outrage. But we continue to denounce it here at InfoWars.
That's right. Well, at least they're going to get rid of Al Franken. He may not be shutting up. He said he still has his voice, but he's lost his seat.
Well, his biggest problem, of course, is that he's a comedian who was never funny. Never
That's right.
funny.
That's right.
I don't
That's
think he's
right.
going to do this living now because he can't make people laugh.
That's right. Yeah, that joke that he did with that, the bad joke that he did with the photograph, that has come back to haunt him as well. But it'll be good riddance for him. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And if we had any more time, we're out of time right now, but I'd talk to you about your comments. We've talked about that in the past, and you talk about it a good deal on the C-SPAN interview about the opposition within President Trump's cabinet. It's a broad-based opposition, but he has withstood this throughout the year. And I think we're going to see a counterstrike. It looks like everything is lined up for that. Thank you so much for joining us, Roger Stone. Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, David.
We're going to be right back with Lee Stranahan. Stay with us. I'm David Knight.
We'll see, but boy, talk about celebration, talk about delivery, talk about us getting used to being lied to and told that politicians would never tell the truth. Well, guess what? Donald Trump isn't one, and he's draining the swamp. He's on the offense. We're going to get into big breaking news. We've given you positive news about the president going after the globalists, declaring financial martial law over the foundations to counter them, a good form of civil emergency. But they're going to be counter-striking. But Roger Stone, my friend, it is good to share New Year's Eve with you, my comrade in libertarian capitalism.
Alex, Happy New Year. Hope you had a terrific holiday season. Boy, the president has delivered our presents in spades. The elitists are hysterical, near suicidal, because both on the economic front, on the foreign policy front, the president is doing exactly what he told the American people he would do. Something that's unheard of in American politics, a candidate who gets elected and actually delivers on their platform. And now with this new executive order, which David and I spoke about extensively yesterday morning, he's laid the groundwork for a sweep up of the bad guys. You can see that this was specifically tailored for the Uranium One situation, for a sweep up of Bill, Hillary, and perhaps even Barack Obama himself in terms of the massive crimes that they have been exposed on in just the last 3 weeks.
And by the way, everybody knows we don't hype stuff here. We just lay out the facts. Suddenly, so I saw the executive order last week, and I had you on, I had Corsi, and I agree that's where it's going. And the Saudi Arabian deal and all of it, cutting off their money. But now, not just Schmidt, not just McCabe resigning, you have suddenly hundreds of leftist newspapers, CNN, The Nation, you name it, saying it's all a fraud. The Russiagate was a fraud. It was criminal. It was terrible. The Clintons are evil. They're finally giving up the ghost, I believe, at least on the surface. So let's get into their counter-strike, or, you know, we know they're duplicitous. There's no honor amongst thieves. But to you, the listeners, everybody else, I think the age of treachery that we've been in for 50 years is beginning to turn. Doesn't mean there's some utopia we're about to enter, but the age of honor is coming back. So here is the sun coming back. Here is the light coming back. And here is to you, Roger Stone, to President Trump and our listeners. I salute you all, my friend.
Thank you, Alex. And here's to you and the entire vanguard at InfoWars, because you have been the cutting edge of this revolution.
Well, I don't want to brag about it, but the history books have to be written. It's just an example of victory. We've both gone through hell. They tried to kill you, and they asked you to classify that you were hit with the polonium, and they've tried to destroy everything I've got and come pretty close, and, you know, tried to take my kids away from me. It's been a serious, but you know what? I'm not an SJW. I don't feel sorry for myself. These scars are my masterwork. I mean, this scarred body, I love it. I love the battle scars. I just love being a man, Roger. Not a superstar, not a Superman, but a man. I mean, how good does it feel to see real history now with our fingertips and our listeners and activist fingertips all over it? I mean, this is epic.
That which does not kill us makes us stronger. I have no doubt whatsoever, Alex, that Donald Trump could not have been nominated without the support of InfoWars.
and the entire alternative conservative community across the board. 2016 was the year in which the mainstream media lost their stranglehold on the entire dissemination of political information. Now they seek, I think too late, to put the toothpaste back in the tube. But make no mistake about it, the deep state does intend to counterattack. They are not just going to go quietly. They are continuing to plot and scheme against this president. Now, I know with the president ending the year on a high with his massive tax cut, the largest tax cut in US history, and a real surge in the stock market, historic lows in unemployment, a boom in the housing market, a new confidence in America around the globe, that this will seem far-fetched to some. Some will scoff and say, oh, you fellows are just conspiracy theorists. No, let me be as clear as I can. The 25th Amendment strategy that I have outlined here on InfoWars is still very much afoot.
And that will be accompanied by drugging of his food. We'll talk about it next segment. But right now, I want to get into the victory with you. And then I want to get into their counterstrikes and the big news you're going to be breaking about who's going to be leaving the administration next and the big fight there. But what does it mean to have CNN, the New York Times, The Nation, and a bunch, I mean, so many papers, I can't even list them all. I covered them earlier, admitting it's all a fraud. It's an attack on free speech. I mean, some of these things have you front page. Here it is. Russiagate is devolving into an effort to stigmatize dissent. It's got you testifying on Capitol Hill. I mean, all of this, what does that signify? Because that can't just be playing possum. I mean, suddenly to have hundreds of papers saying we were wrong, Russiagate's authoritarian, we're sorry. I mean, I think they're doing it because it blew up in their face, and they know now that they just hope it goes away.
Well, this has been a failed gambit. The entire argument that Donald Trump was assisted in his election by Vladimir Putin and the Russians has collapsed. It's collapsed of its own weight because there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that that is the case. But it would be a mistake, Alex, to think that CNN and the hardcore left, the George Soros-financed cabal that has run this country for the last 30 years, is going to throw in the towel.
They can't give up.
I see a real difference between responsible, yes, even patriotic liberals who are just misguided in their views, but who don't hate America, like some of the folks at The Nation, who have reached the right conclusion, which is to say the entire Russian charade is an attempt to stifle free expression, and that they've come up empty-handed, despite the fact that they spent millions.
and it's destroying the FBI. But what would CNN? Have you seen CNN now has multiple articles saying, quote, Trump was right about the FBI.
That's today. What will they say tomorrow? In other words, I think that is a tactic rather than a change in strategy. And they know that the president is having a very, very strong December, to say the least, that he's going into the new year with the wind to his back. But
so they're just leaning on the ropes right now, knowing it's killing them to be anti-American recovery. So they're just kind of recessing into the shadows.
Well, I have a number of things to report about the plot that is afoot when we get to the next segment. But Alex, in the meantime, I really hope that the expansion of InfoWars can continue and that folks will go to the InfoWars store, because it's programming just like this that's paid for by our listeners. We don't have any wealthy billionaire right-wingers standing in the wings.
No George Soros.
We have no George Soros.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because we're going to break right now. Absolutely. We deliver. I mean, if there was anything you ever invested in, you get great products at the same time. Buying products in InfoWars, best products, best prices, whether it's water filters, air filters, shirts, clothing, high-quality supplements. You cannot get better products at better prices, and you cannot fund a more savage group of people committed, like kamikazes, to taking on communism, globalism, and pedophilia, and Satanism, and crushing the state. I mean, this is it, folks. So support us in the new year. InfoWarsStore.com. Free shipping store-wide right now. But see, the whole globalist shadow government program can cut both ways against the New World Order. They wanted to run their Operation Valkyrie. We're running ours. By the way, I met with my CPA, who's also on a bunch of boards of major corporations. He's one of the top CPAs in Texas. And he was very proud of it, and so was I. We're both paying more taxes under the Trump plan. because we're nouveau riche, upper middle class, not super wealthy, but wealthy, successful. And they got rid of the exemption on the property taxes above $10,000 and did a bunch of other stuff. So, yeah, I got a 2-point cut in income taxes, but the other stuff I'm paying more. I love it. I don't like the globalist fat cat liberals having $20 million houses and putting all their stuff in that and paying no tax, basically, federally with their exemption. And so Cuomo and others are so pissed. You're right. All you liberal, ultra-rich people, they admit liberals in Congress have 70+% of the money. I'm sick of filthy rich tax-exempt jerks like Bezos that's taxpayer-funded with stuff he got Obama to pass, telling a working family making $200,000 a year that they're rich pigs. They all got big tax cuts, and people making 50 grand did, and now all these bonuses, and I love it! And I love paying more taxes if it means getting the country going. Roger Stone, what do you say to this? And then get into all your huge news. Now you got huge news. You're going to ride shotgun with Caputo coming up. But, man, just seeing Trump deliver, it's just so good after the dark night of liars with the Democrats and Republican scumbags to see somebody who isn't out to rape the country.
Well, Alex, I love it when you call Governor Cuomo out, because a very, very prominent New Yorker went to Governor Cuomo only days ago and said, look, since you no longer have the deductibility of New York's very high income taxes, why not have New York taxpayers pay that money to a tax-free foundation, to a nonprofit, which would then give it to the state? They could take the deduction, the state would get the money, everybody would benefit. And the governor's response was, not interested. No, he's only interested in trashing President Trump. He's not interested in a true solution and lower taxes for the people of the Empire State. So, Alex, I think you hit it right on the head. For the vast majority of working Americans, this tax cut is evocative of the tax cuts of Ronald Reagan, John F. Kennedy, and we know that a rising tide lifts all boats.
Well, think about Trump, how much property he owns. This is the untold story. I was doing the math last night just on what's available. This looks like he's going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars a year on write-off himself. I mean, when I saw that my taxes actually went up, but for working class and middle class it went down, it made me love Trump even more. He actually, the ultra rich should be paying more tax. He's like the real Bernie Sanders. It's incredible.
No, and this has some precedent. When he thought about running for president in 2000, he put forward a proposal in which the mega rich would pay more. This included himself. He knew that he would be taxing himself greater, but he wanted to erase the deficit to make America stronger. That's the kind of selfless patriot Donald Trump is. So yes, he will pay more under this plan. You and I will pay more. But the vast majority of working Americans who voted for Donald Trump are going to get a tax cut. And the people can dispose of their own money better than the government can.
It's sick. It's suddenly I want to pay my taxes, and I never have, because suddenly I feel like it's finally for America, at least in the idea.
Well, look, I follow the writings of economists like Larry Kudlow and Steve Moore of the Heritage Foundation, and they've been beating this drum all the way back to the Trump campaign. Donald Trump had from the beginning the most dynamic, the most pro-growth tax proposal of any candidate, Republican or Democrat. And now, lo and behold, despite the fact that some in the Congress have added some Christmas tree provisions, he's making it happen. This is going to be the greatest economic boom in American history, and it's going to turbocharge our economy, which is going to make removing him even harder, but that will not in any way dampen the attempt by the deep state and the two-party duopoly, the elites of both the Republican and Democratic Party, who still, despite the president's incredible success, want this president gone.
And let's be clear, then I'm going to give the big news. If you look at the geniuses within the next 2 years, analysts agree it's going to put pressure on the blue states that write off their income tax that's super high and write off their property tax that's super high, that then balloons it because it's written off. It makes people launder money through it. Then no money goes to the central government. Then the money only goes to rich globalists in those states that are writing it off. This actually makes them pay taxes, but it'll put pressure for the states now and the cities that do this to lower taxes to reasonable levels. I mean, you look at the genius, it's like, I think I'm pretty smart. Roger, but I read this in Aftermath now, and I go, man, as bad as some of his advisors are, whatever's happening, some good stuff's going on, Roger.
Well, what the president said in that New York Times interview a couple of days ago is absolutely right. He understands tax policy better than the economists. Alex, let's move to the news because I think it's important.
Yeah, I'm going to the next segment, too, because Caputo's coming up. Yeah, let's get in just to give us a taste of what's coming up, the good, the bad, the ugly, because there's some bad news, too. We got some big news on who's going to be leaving. Let's do 25th Amendment right now, though.
Well, first, let's go to a question you asked me yesterday, because at least 3 senior administration sources told me, and I reported here at InfoWars, that Secretary of State Tillerson was leaving around January 1st. Now, suddenly, after a private meeting with General Mattis and General Kelly, well, it appears that Mr. Tillerson is staying, at least for the time being. I don't know what reason the generals gave the president, but I know what their game plan is. They need Tillerson's vote for their 25th Amendment takedown. They are head counting. Anybody who thinks that Mike Pence isn't planning to move into the big office is wrong. His top aide, Nick Ayers, was caught leaking detrimental information about the president, and rather than fire Ayers, his press secretary, Mark Lotter, an exceptionally able young man, took the fall for him. So there are people staying and there are people leaving. We will get back into it in the next segment, as you say. But I stand by my prediction. Tillerson will stay around long enough to be of use to the deep state. Let's not forget where Tillerson came from. He was recommended for the Secretary of State job by Condoleezza Rice, hardly a Trump supporter.
Exactly. I'm just frothing about how good things are, but you're right. I mean, it's just like McCabe, the architect of the fake Russiagate investigation as the deputy director, advised the president, I guess Rosenstein, to put him in. Now he's leaving as the president knows he's a fraud. That's an example of how the president's really smart instinct-wise, but surrounded on research by bad research, putting in globalists around him.
Well, I think he's often, Alex, not told all the facts. In other words, they say, Mr. President, this is John Smith. He had excellent grades in college. He's been endorsed by 5 Republican U.S. senators that you like. He'd be perfect for this job. No one says, and oh, by the way, he's a member of the Trilateral Commission and the Council on Foreign Relations, and he worked in the George W. Bush White House. So I think they lied to the president by omission. And he's not a political animal. He's a businessman. He's a visionary.
He's a straight shooter. We'll be back then on their 25th Amendment plan and who's going to be leaving the administration next, who they plan to replace it with, exclusives with Roger Stone and Michael Caputo straight ahead. Stay with us. You know, they call me a schmuck, psychopath, sociopath, Stu. They think I'm a dummy because I don't want to screw people over. So I'm a softie. I really care about people. I care about doing what I say I'm going to do. I also like to beat the brains out of my enemies politically and physically if need be. I'm not saying I'm a tough guy, but I'm ready to fight. And I got to tell you, I feel so satisfied, so satiated. I feel so empowered. I feel so good about pushing Trump and going with my gut. And everything that's happened in the last 11 months and 10 days, it's amazing. Michael Caputo, former senior advisor to the Trump campaign, head of the New York campaign as well, politics at NewYork.net. He's been accused of being a Russian agent. That whole narrative's falling apart spectacularly. We'll get his take in a moment on what he sees happening in the new year and just where we're at politically. But wow, I just feel like if I'm not gushing, I'm not being honest, and I'm always just honest. But Roger Stone, there are some poison linings to this. Give us the intrigue you've been trying to get to, but I wanted to hold it till now, about the big resignation you learned about from little Birdie, big exclusive. The media all pays attention to your exclusives because they're 99% of the time accurate. Your big exclusive, and then the next big shoe to drops and the 6. We shouldn't be too arrogant, as the wolf says in Pulp Fiction. We shouldn't start, you know what, each other yet. What should we be watching for? Roger Stone, and we'll co-host here with Michael Caputo here in just a minute.
Well, Alex, I think you're absolutely right. We should not just assume because the president is having these extraordinary successes that it in any way dampens the resolve of the deep state or tamps down the deep enmity they have for both the president culturally or his policies, which are, nationalist, which are pro-American sovereignty, which are pro-American exceptionalism, which are, a tip of the hat to Americana and the greatness of this country. They've had their way for 30 years. They have no intention of relinquishing the steering wheel to Donald Trump this easily. They're still shocked that he pulled off his most improbable victory in the last election against all odds. General John Kelly, whose own personal politics are progressive left, and who has sought to put a cocoon around the president, cutting him off from his natural allies in the conservative and liberty movement, is telling intimates that he himself will leave within 3 to 4 months. And I think this is the key. And the president's new chief of staff would be Rob Porter of Ohio, the Bush Quisling, the U.S. Senator, member of the Trilateral Commission and the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, I bring this up now, and I know that some out there will say, oh, this is a conspiracy theory. Let us just see. I think it's vital that the president know who Rob Porter is. And when they say the president, do they necessarily mean Donald Trump? Mark my words, Alex, despite the fact that we're high-fiving each other right now and that the president is in an exceptionally good mood, having had a great year, this is going to come on fast and furious, and it will be vicious. You're going to see an uptake in the Trump is crazy talk. You heard it here on InfoWars First. I said it months ago. When the Russian collusion delusion collapses, when they are proven to be completely
You said it in March. You said it in March. You said, because you have the sources. And that's where I want to go next with you and Michael Caputo, politicsny.net, is that why is the New York Times, Michael Caputo, why is all these publications saying, okay, Russiagate's fake, the FBI is in trouble, we admit it's a fraud, let's just leave it alone. Why are they signaling that all over the place the last 4 or 5 days? Michael Caputo, what do you make of that, being a former top Trump advisor, and then other big issues? You're the expert here. What other information do you want to impart to the listeners about where we are right now in this war to retake America from the globalists?
It's interesting. I think, frankly, that it was always going to end this way. The Russia-Trump collusion, delusion was always going to come apart. And I think the left is probably high-fiving themselves that they were able to keep that ball in the air as long as they were able to. Frankly, this has all been about a very important agenda on the left. That is, they're going to destroy Donald Trump. They're going to destroy his family. They're going to destroy his businesses. And they're going to destroy his friends. Because, God forbid, in 10 years or 15 years, another American-minded billionaire comes forward and says, honey, I can fix this. I think I need to run for president. They want that person to have a second thought. Look what they did to Trump and his family and his businesses and his friends. And I think they've taken this Russia collusion delusion as far down the track as they could. Alex, when I was working with the president during the campaign, there was a point when there was a signal to me, I thought, that the Hillary side of the campaign had cracked the code, had figured out how to get Donald Trump. And that was to insult him, to insult his family, or to insult his businesses in an unreasonable and an unseemly way, have that advanced by the media, and he would get angry and make mistakes. We saw that time and again tried on him during the campaign, and occasionally it succeeded. What they've done here is, as we saw in the book Shattered, which was written about the time after the election, the Clinton team decided that they were going to have this Russia collusion delusion as their front line, as their first story, and try to put the president in a situation where he would mess up, and in this circumstance, perhaps commit obstruction. And I think they're satisfied that they've moved the ball so far as they have.
What do you make of them then suddenly coming out and saying, okay, it's a fraud, okay? I mean, is that just them hedging their bets because they realize the public isn't buying into it, because now all these documents have come out and the admissions of like 26 people in the FBI and Justice Department colluding to make all this up?
It's interesting, Alex. I'd love to hear what Roger has to say. I haven't had the chance to talk to him about this, but the big blockbuster nothing burger in the New York Times about Papadopoulos that came out this weekend, I can't quite figure out, trying to read the tea leaves, why they would break this story on New Year's Eve weekend, which I believe is perhaps the worst weekend of the year to break news. I wonder what Roger thinks about that.
Let me take a shot at this. Here's the thing I think it's important to understand. The globalists always have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C. Plan A has been a limited success in the sense that they have tied the president up for over a year over nothing. And sadly, a substantial number of Americans, thank God a minority, still believe that the Kremlin somehow tried to help Donald Trump get elected, despite the fact that they've turned up no evidence whatsoever.
Or that all three of us work for the Kremlin.
And they have taken, they accused us of being Russian agents. They accused InfoWars of using Russian bots to post our links, complete nonsense. They take a completely innocent and totally legal meeting by Donald Trump Jr., and they try to make it a criminal conspiracy or at a minimum, a campaign finance violation. It is neither. But they are abandoning plan A. It's over. We're now moving to plan B. Plan B is a removal under the 25th Amendment, a bogus claim.
And as you said, Kelly and others, everybody wants to lionize them. You think from your sources, let me ask Caputo that we come back. What about the 25th Amendment? I mean, how can they get rid of the president now? More Rapegate, made up stuff. We'll talk about it all. Michael Caputo, former senior advisor to Trump during the campaign, politics, NewYork.net. And of course, we have Roger Stone of Infowars.com with us. Don't forget, we are listener funded and supported. Free shipping store-wide. It's got to end in the next 2 days. We're not on Amazon. We don't get taxpayer funded. Free shipping store-wide and 50% off all our best-selling items. Infowarsstore.com or 888-253-3139. Thank you all for your support. It's why we are able to do this, so thank you all. I got to tell you, this is an amazing final broadcast of 2017. And we're so accustomed to evil and corruption, to just see a president that's not out to get us, is actually trying to turn the country back on and trying to be fair, is amazing. So I really asked Michael Caputo, former top Trump advisor, and of course, Roger Stone, former head of his campaign, to just take over this final segment. Because if they pause, I'll run rampant here and just give us other tidbits. And I said, Caputo and Stone, what do you talk about? And they said, well, what's next? Indictment of Jared Kushner, but also midterms 2018. Because 2016 is our beachhead, 2018's key. Say what you want about Roy Moore. He got the election stolen from him. That's been proven. So I think election fraud is going to be the key to what they do. So, guys, go ahead and have a free-for-all for the 10 minutes we have left here.
All right. Well, I'm happy to dive in. Look, I think Mueller has had as bad a month of December as the president had good. His entire probe is exposed as the partisan witch hunt that it is. His hit squad is exposed as exactly that. And now the only way that he can regain the upper hand is through the guilty plea of General Mike Flynn, who I believe is a great, great patriot. Flynn has been jammed up in a process crime. There's nothing illegal or improper regarding his outreach to the Russians to set up a meeting. In case you haven't been paying attention, folks, the Russians have thermonuclear weapons. Not speaking to them would be very, very dangerous. But we do know that Flynn has said publicly that a senior member of the president's transition team instructed him to reach out to the Russian ambassador. That can only be Mr. Kushner. Let me stress again, even if Jared Kushner did do that, that's a perfectly appropriate legal function of the transition and a counselor to the president. Yet we know that the FBI has grilled Kushner for hours. And therefore, the question becomes, do they try to jam him up with some kind of process crime, like they did with Flynn, in an attempt to inflame the president and induce the president to fire Mueller, or perhaps to pardon both Kushner and Flynn.
Well, clearly that was their admitted plan. They've telegraphed it with all their talking points on CNN. But now Michael Caputo, it seems to be blowing up as it's, I mean, even mainstream publications admit it's all a frame-up of Trump. I mean, are they crazy enough to go forward with this? What comes next?
Well, I think it's interesting. I don't just count the tea leaves that are there. I look for the ones that aren't there. And you know what's not there? After all these stories about what Flynn did and what the coffee boy Papadopoulos did, we've seen very little about Jared Kushner. And the question, you know, we also see that the Kushner and his legal team were out shopping for a public relations firm. So it appears they are looking, you know, forward into 2018 and seeing a more serious fight on their hands as well. So the lack.
Oh, absolutely. They plan to indict Kushner next. I don't think they got the huevos to do it to Donald Jr. So yeah, go, keep going.
Yeah, I just think the lack of news on Kushner shows to me that he's probably, his time in the barrel is coming in this new year. And that's unfortunate, but, you know, he appears to be their new target. We also see in this New York Times story, as many errors as I saw in it, we also see that Papadopoulos was somebody who was running absolutely amok. And if you believe what the New York Times is saying, he was doing things that were, you know, and the one thing that's, the two things that are very much missing from that New York Times story is there's no mention of anyone who carried his water to the president or that he actually connected.
Well, yeah, he's like this low-level guy that keeps going, let's meet with the Russians. They're like, shut up. Russians, they don't matter. It's like hundreds of times. He was obvious. It looks to me like he was a plant from the beginning. I mean, you read those transcripts. Does it not look like he's a plant from the beginning?
It does.
He's either a plant or he's just stupid. Let's be clear. He's a volunteer. He has no authority. He's not on the payroll. He doesn't have a past.
Sure, but he's like a wind-up doll. He just goes, meet with the Russians, meet with the Russians, and then they're like, shut up, kid. Russians aren't. I mean, it's like there's nothing there.
Some of the interesting parts of the story were that it was very clear from the New York Times story that everybody in the campaign thought this guy was stupid, that he was foolishly enthusiastic, and that he had terrible ideas. And it comes through in the story as well. I think they also in that story said that Sessions, I believe it was, wanted to move away from his ideas because there was no way if they were ever going to meet with the Russians that they would do so through the auspices of a young and inexperienced person like Papadopoulos. So some of that.
Well, exactly. That's the meetings I'm saying where Sessions is like, yeah. Russians. What? It's like talking about, you know, just random crap.
But let's play it out here. See, what they would like to have happen is the president, first of all, it's not inconsistent because the indictment of Kushner would be not related to Russian collusion. It would be related to lying to the FBI.
Right.
Then they hope that the president will overreact and fire Mueller. This is their briar patch strategy. They are so naked.
Please throw
to
us.
have Congresswoman Jackie Speier, rhymes with liar, running around saying, oh, the rumors everywhere. Trump is going to fire Mueller. They want him to fire
So let me ask you both. Let me ask Michael Caputo here as we end this year's transmissions. Clearly, it's falling apart. How do they extricate themselves with face shaving? Or is all this face shaving a ploy for what they're really about to do with Russiagate? Is it dead or does it still have legs? Michael Caputo.
I think that the House and Senate investigations, the multiple investigations over in Congress there, are going to wind down. You'll see Representative Smear and Representative Schiff spending a lot of time screaming about it to the press because they've gotten a free ride in the media for quite some time. I believe we'll see Mueller's investigation wind down necessarily too, with maybe even some more process crimes accused and prosecuted. But in the end, I think the net that they're gonna come up with is just going to have one Papadopoulos in it and nobody else. Because I believe Manafort and Gates are going to break free of these allegations. And I believe General Flynn, when we find out what Agent Strzok did and how he tricked him into this this alleged interview where he lied, I think that's going to come out in the wash as well.
I totally agree. But, you know, they never give up, even though they're getting their ass kicked politically, you name it. If America doesn't roll over like Bernie Sanders did when they stole the nomination, when Hillary did, we're going to win. But if we roll over, that's the bottom line. You know, I had the crew run out to the local grocery store to get a bottle of champagne here at the end because I didn't have any alcohol when Roger was drinking his dry martini. But to Mike Caputo and to Roger Stone and to Donald Trump and to our listeners, most importantly, we're not perfect, but we're not out to screw you over. We're not out to set up some, Venezuelan or North Korean hellhole because we're a bunch of, 1 inch, long people that hate everybody. So happy New Year to everybody. And I want to give you both a 1 minute comment here at the end. But to my crew and all of you and the listeners, I love you. And I am so proud to be associated with people that are pro-freedom and pro-America. So to all of you, to Mr. Caputo and Mr. Stone and the great crew here, God bless you, gentlemen. Each of you, Mr. Caputo first, a 1 minute final comment here as we go into 2018.
Well, 2017 has been hell for a lot of people. It's been difficult in a lot of ways, but we sure came out of it strong. I've always known Donald Trump to finish strong when he's in the midst of a difficult business battle. And he ended 2017, I think, with one for the record books. With what he did with regulations, cutting 900 plus regulations, installing Gorsuch and a dozen appeals court justices, he's achieved more in 1 year than many presidents have in their first year. And he comes out of it, depending upon what poll you believe, with just about the same poll rating that Barack Obama did in his first year. That doesn't sound great to me, though, because in my book, 2018 is going to be a big challenge. We can get there. The campaign geniuses in Washington have to come to terms with some unfortunate facts. But what they can't do, and they should never do, is, let's say, abandon and kick out of the party the Bannons, the Breitbarts, the InfoWars, the Fox News, the grassroots, the people who elected
exactly. We've got a huge year ahead of us. If we go to sleep, the globalists could win. If we stay awake, we win. Roger Stone, let's both here toast to you and the audience, everybody. I salute you. We got 30 seconds left. Final comment going into 2018.
Well, Alex, look, I want to salute you because you had the courage and the foresight to be for Donald Trump when people like Glenn Beck were saying, oh, he's a disaster, he's a sure loser. And you never wavered. Well, I remember talking to you the day the NBC Billy Bush tape dropped. You never wavered. You said, we're going to get over this, we're going to win this thing. And you were right. Watch the president regain the initiative coming up soon when he fires Rod Rosenstein. That's my prediction for 2018.
To Americana, to freedom. To you, my friend. To the audience, God bless you, to the crew. Thank you. 1 year later, we delivered. You did it, folks. We did it together. Thank God. Thank Jesus. We did it. Happy New Year, folks.